Welcome back to my daily read-through of DC Universe Rebirth Detective Comics by James Tynion IV. Today I'll be reading issue 935. Alright, so again, I'll go through my 6 points. The cover, or covers, the creative team, the meaning or the main point of this issue, the art highlight of the issue, callbacks or connections to past issues, both in this run and in other stories, and lastly, the rating out of 10 stars. So let's begin. This cover is actually the variant cover. You can tell, a little bit of insider knowledge. This is issue 935. You can see that up here. And it also is cover 2 and then printing 1. So this is the first time I've ever pulled comics when Rebirth started 2 years ago. And Detective Comics, because my favorite character in comics is Stephanie Brown, the spoiler, also has been Robin and Batgirl. The fact that she was in Detective Comics with this classic logo was really important to me, and I wanted to support that. So instead of just picking up issues on a Wednesday, just coming into the store, I actually got a box of my own, a pull list. The other 2 titles I was pulling were Batgirl and the Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman by Greg Rucka. I stopped pulling Wonder Woman once Greg Rucka left, but I have continued to pull Birds of Prey, although it's about to end, sadly. And I'm probably going to stop pulling Detective after this, although Brian Hill does seem like he's going to write a pretty cool comic. We'll have to wait and see what his are like. This cover, as I said, is a variant. Again, you can see that because it's a 2 instead of 1, with the second to last number. Again, this is the issue number, those first 3 digits, and then the cover number, and then the printing number. DC Universe Rebirth sold out a lot, so there's a lot of people who have the 2 at the end of the printing. But I, since I had a pull list for the first time in my life, have the first printing. But I didn't like the original cover, so I'll get you the digital copy of the original cover. This is by Eddie Barrows, the main series artist, and the one who did the most covers for the series. I like the fact that it has both Batwoman and Batman, so you have that team feeling, and he's fighting the main antagonists of this arc, these soldiers, who we find out in this issue are called the Colony. But I just don't like this construction nearly as much, whereas the vivid red and black, and you have a little bit of gray and yellow, but it's mostly red and black, with the white of Batwoman's face and the more flesh tone of Batman's face. It's just so dramatic and pleasing. Like I said about the last one, where Raphael Albuquerque just did a solo Batman with the purple and black main color scheme. This has the red and black, but I really like this layout, so I went with this instead of the main cover. So that's the covers. Again, this is written by James Tynion IV. Art is by Eddie Barrows. This came out 2 weeks after 934. Listening to a couple of podcasts with writers, they've said that for a once-a-month comic, you really need 2 artists, one to be your main artist and one to do fill-ins, to let the main artist have a rest and to get ahead on the next arc. When you're doing twice a month, you need at least 4 art teams. And you see that for the first arc, we just had 2 artists. We had Eddie Barrows and then the other main series artist, Alvaro Martinez. But then we immediately had 2 issues from a crossover that we'll get to let both of them catch up. And then each of them just did 2 issues in the next arc of 5 issues, with 1 issue of fill-in by 2 different fill-in artists. Fill-in artists can be good. They give a different focus, a different highlight to characters who might not be the main focus of the main issues, you might say. But there's also a sense of them being less important, unfortunately. A sense that since the visual style is being broken up, there's not as much importance being given to it. So that's the one really downside of having twice a month issues. On the other side, you really get the story moving. Now, I said last review about the Eternal series, which were once a week, but you can't, not one person can write once a week, really. So you have to have at least 4 or 5 different writers to do once a week, and that really leads to a sense of disjointedness. There's the voices of the characters tend to be very different from issue to issue, and sometimes there's really big continuity problems. So having one writer do twice a month is doable, but you do get some problems, which we'll come into later when we're about halfway through the run. But for this first arc, the really big issue is a sense of time. So let's move on to point 3, the point of this arc. The point of this arc is to show the relationships between the characters and to show the real first clash of Batman and the enemies. Again, I said we found out that these are called the Colony. They're a bunch of soldiers which are militarized using gear derived from observing Batman. And we'll find out more about them, obviously, as the arc goes on. This is... it is the Mudroom. It is basically the Danger Room. Tynion has clearly stated that he loves the X-Men, and he wanted to borrow a lot of the inspiration from the X-Men in his construction. So this is his Danger Room, which is constructed using Clayface material by Tim Drake. So Tim Drake's their tech guy. Clayface provides the material, and he feels kind of weird about that. There's just so much fun construction, world building. Here's a picture of the Belfry, which is basically Tim Drake's Batcave. Now, in Batman Eternal, we found out that he set up what are called Robin's nests all over Gotham City and all over the world, because he functioned out of New York as the leader of the Teen Titans. But here he's come back and built this Belfry, and it's very important to him to have a base in the middle of Gotham City so he can help Gotham without worrying about having to cross the bay from Wayne Manor. And it's a really cool building. You'll get to see more about it as it goes on. So for our artistic highlight, I wanted to show you this piece where we see 3 characters: Stephanie Brown the Spoiler, Tim Drake, Red Robin, and Cassandra Cain Orphan. Here you find out that Steph has her own apartment as opposed to living with Harper Row, which she did during Batman and Robin Eternal. Cassandra also has an apartment, but she doesn't spend much time there. She just crashes at Steph or Harper's place. And we find out here that Tim and Steph are dating. And you see, again, this technique of the painted type style panels. Now, I don't think it's really painted. I think it's a digital coloring technique, but the lines are overlaid with color to make the shading of the hair and the shadows, instead of, you see here, the pencil lines forming the main structure of the faces. This is both a positive and a negative. These are some of the most appealing faces that Barrows has ever drawn. He tends to have kind of a Joker face for his main character. So Tim Drake actually looks pretty nice here, but sometimes when he makes that face later on in the run, Barrows will draw him with just a really creepy looking grin. And I don't think he means to make it creepy. It's just one of the things. But here is very appealing, even though Steph's face morphs a bit. She doesn't quite look the same here, and then looks very different. But this is actually the first time we know that they're dating. It's very emotional, especially for those of us who grew up with Tim and Steph being together in the 90s and having a romantic attraction even after that, during the Chuck Dixon Robin run. But there was no real buildup in Batman and Robin Eternal after she was reintroduced. They didn't really interact more than a couple times. But there is a really great little panel or sequence in the last issue of Batman Eternal, which is the series where Steph was reintroduced by Scott Snyder and James Tynion and a bunch of other people. And here is the panel where Steph and Red Robin really first meet. And the artist, Dave LaFuente, known for his Ultimate Spider-Man work with Brian Bendis, he drew a little heart in the pencils here, and obviously they erased that in coloring, but as part of the whole, there's clearly chemistry. Tim's attracted to her. She thinks he's cute. She's got sort of a blush going on there. But this was in 2015. This was a full year later, and there had been basically no interaction between them since then, and all of a sudden they're dating. a lot of fans have said this is a weakness. I think it is something of a weakness of the run in terms of not really letting us see it. Tynion does work to make up for it by having a lot of flashbacks of Tim and Steph in their relationship, but it still doesn't really show the getting to know each other or why they got together. So it still feels abrupt. But this scene being the first indication that they're really together and romantically involved is very sweet and very appealing, and that's why I have it as the artistic highlight. I've already shown you the callback here. There's one other callback I noticed when Tim Drake overrides the mud room. So Batwoman has them running for 3 hours against a bunch of Clayface material Jokers. He gives the Red Robin override code 436, and that is the issue of Batman number 436, where Tim Drake first appeared. So that's a fun little cameo, and Tynion does a lot of those kinds of callbacks. So this issue, number 935, was very good. An excellent follow-up to the first issue, 934. And so I'm going to give it the same rating of a 7 out of 10 stars. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.